Let's go ahead and go with a quick sound check, mic check real fast. Let's go ahead and go with a quick sound check, mic check real fast. Let's go ahead and go with a quick sound check, mic check real fast. Let's go ahead and go with a quick sound check, mic check real fast. Let's go ahead and go with a quick sound check, mic check real fast. Let's go ahead and go with a quick sound check, mic check real fast. Let's go ahead and go with a quick sound check, mic check real fast. Let's go ahead and go. Hello, mic check again. Had some technical difficulties there. One second here, guys. I may have to refresh the stream. Well, I'm getting some input here. Well, I'm getting some input here. There we go. Much better. Well, I'm getting some input here. There we go. Much better. Okay, hopefully my mic will stay cooperative here for this recording. Now, I've heard there's some controversy going on with 14 at the moment. And sort of a, I guess you could say, dev versus player headbutting and all that. Now you might be thinking, of course, why should I even care when I don't even take this game that seriously anymore? Well, it's because I do still care for the people who still play at the very least. I may not care for myself so much, but I do still care for people I know that are still playing the game, so. With that in mind, let's go ahead and have a little chat about some issues that I've noticed arising. So, with this recent released patch, the first thing is, Samurai. There's been some complications with Samurai, which just so happens to be my main job and has been my main job since its inception, in Stormblood. And so I feel like it's worth putting in kind of my 2 cents here and just kind of lending my voice to the chorus that's already rising towards things. Now, there's another issue with that, and that's also housing. It's not exactly at all what people wanted it to be. And indeed, it seems to be like this current iteration of housing only favors the few and not the many, which is something that needs to be clarified in detail on exactly what that should mean. Not only that, but there also needs to be some clarity, I feel like, with the overall way feedback is given and received. Because a lot of this seems to lead me to conclude that a lot of what we really want to see as players is kind of really tone deaf. And I feel like those who are gathering the feedback are kind of doing it at random. Like, they just pick and choose a couple things and randomly draw it from a sorting hat or something like that. Kind of like an RNG element that we already have in game, basically. And so they have this little game with it, if you will. This RNG game. They shuffle them all in a big hat or something, or bucket or whatever, And then the person who's grabbing it closes their eyes, twirls his hand around, picks out something, and then they all agree upon, yeah, okay, this is the feedback that should go to the developers. Okay. That's what it really kind of feels like to me, honestly. Because players have given their suggestions and their feedback, but it feels like they're not really being answered. And even during the live letters, we have people trying to ask Yoshida, hey, trying to get his attention, say, hey, this is not okay, this doesn't sound good, please don't do this or don't do that, please reconsider this, please consider that. Just, there's a lot of things that he ends up having to juggle with that instead of getting a straightforward, okay, this is the way they want it, and so forth. And it's a little unfortunate that it has to be that way, but regrettably, there isn't a whole lot that we per se can do, at least not by ourselves. We really need everyone together in order to inflict meaningful change, which is what I've said in a lot of my previous streams, is that if in order to get something done, we're going to have to stand together and take the fight to things like investors and, white knight guards, the old guard, etc., that are stuck kind of in this jaded mentality that things should stay a certain way and only change if they feel like it needs changing, etc. Kind of dictatorial, if you will. And this samurai change is a prime example of such a thing, which is why I think it's important that we talk about that in this video discussion here. But before that, most of you probably want to hear my take and my comments on the samurai adjustments and changes first, before we go into the long tangent of player feedback and such stuff like that and housing. So let's go ahead and start there. So with this introduction of patch 6.1 of the Endwalker expansion, the ability Hisatsu Kaiten here has been given the axe, quite literally. It's no longer an available action, and in its place, they juggled around the potencies of our weapon skills and our EI Jutsu, and unfortunately our weapon skills got a buff, which is a good thing. I think they should be buffed because, us players as samurais, we don't have any sort of raid synergy or utility to give to the party. We're just going in to take care of business, and that's it, basically, A very no-nonsense, straightforward job. And that's the way it should be, honestly, as samurai. It should be pretty straightforward. There shouldn't be, you know, we shouldn't have to worry basically about all these different buffs and all this other utility to manage and have uptime of. Because, you guys, I'll tell you this, and this is my perspective as a veteran Final Fantasy player. Yes, I said Final Fantasy, not Final Fantasy 14 in particular, but as a Final Fantasy, um, you know, series player. The samurai job has always been about burst damage. Like big attacks that are flashy and, you know, they just take the boss's HP down like a notch, you know, like that's basically how samurai has been in previous Final Fantasy games. It's always been more about like slowly like what's the word? Diminishing your enemy's HP bar with big spending attacks, which usually end up with longer cooldowns or like, you know, some sort of like debuff status or whatever, like slow or whatever. That's how basically how samurai has functioned within the Final Fantasy universe, is that it's basically been a job where you're going in just, you know, dishing out those high special flashy moves and just basically cutting away at, whittling basically away at your enemy's HP to activate those big point spenders that deal high damage. And that's essentially Samurai's core identity in the Final Fantasy franchise. Now, 14's iteration has also been kind of like that. However, with the introduction of it, it was added in a time where the devs kind of thought that it would be a wonderful idea to include a resource management to all jobs across the board. And that's how Samurai ended up having to manage the Kenki resource, which is, you know, the little swords up here that you can see on my screen. That's basically the Kenki bar. And it would basically be accumulated resource which you would then spend on a big, giant, flashy move. So again, that's kind of keeping in theme with the identity of the job of samurai, but at the same time, you know, it kind of detracts from it as well, because, as I've said, samurai's not all about, like, managing stuff. It's more about just jumping right in and whittling your enemy's HP little by little until, like, you know, you deal enough damage or something like that, or you crit enough damage that it activates a super mega hitting move, and that takes the boss's HP down by a quarter, or like, you know, something like that. And that's basically how samurais have worked in Final Fantasy. And so they designed the job with that in mind for Final Fantasy XIV, and like I said, it kind of feels like samurai, but it kind of doesn't. Like, this is very much 14's version is very much its like unique take on the samurai job, and while trying to keep in theme basically with it. But again, with 6.1, it was kind of a tipping point for samurai players, and no, they were. Oh, we all samurai players. I will tell you, we were already, those of us who made samurai, we were already pretty unsatisfied with samurai, even in 6.0, like the launch of Endwalker. It was kind of disappointing to hear that they drastically nerfed it from, the test build from, FanFest media tour thing. Like, those who got to play it firsthand, they got the best version of Samurai for Endwalker. Like, quite literally, it was a beast. Like, I'd watched some videos and I looked at the potencies from the test builds that people had shared after the media embargo was lifted, and it was something else, man. But once Endwalker came, I was very disappointed that they had nerfed it instead of considering, maybe we shouldn't touch the damage numbers because it's got nothing else to offer, just raw critical damage is all it's got to offer. And they've boosted that critical damage with this new change, but that was at the cost of potencies. Again, like I said, EI Jutsu really took a hard hit, and even some of these weapon skills. This Hisatsu Sine and Shoha, for example, took a big hit, and Oginami Kiri, they took a big hit as well. And which that doesn't make sense. Like I said, from a thematical point of view and how samurais always work, this does not make any sense at all, this sort of change, when samurai's whole identity is to perform these massive, hard-hitting attacks after they, successfully landed a certain number of blows or hits with their attacks. Once they've landed a certain amount of blows and hits, then they spend these huge, flashy moves that cause some serious damage to the boss's HP bar. And that's how it should have stayed. But for whatever reason, the person that they left in charge for the DPS adjustments, I guess, the melee DPS, because this is how I would imagine, okay, you guys, how they divide the workflow for these specific job changes, okay? I believe that they separate them based on roles. Okay, so one person will handle the healing, okay? Another person will handle the tank roles. Then a different person will handle the melee DPS, a different person will handle range physical, and another person for magical. Because they're on a team, okay? So that means that each team member has to divide the work between themselves. And it could be even maybe the DPS guy handles, melee and physical range at the same time, since they're both physical damaged element jobs. So, okay, so they put the guy who, experienced it with the numbers, the balance adjustment numbers. They set that guy onto those, and then they have the other two or however many guys work on the rest of the roles. And then they kind of, they collaborate and exchange notes between each other and to, Naoki Yoshida, their boss. And they just come to agreements on, say, okay, this does look good, or, how about adjusting this number slightly a little bit? They have these discussions as they're exchanging like notes or like emails, basically. And that's what I imagine it is emails. Because over in Japan, that's a very popular thing to use to discuss to each other when in like the workplace or at school or something, is they use email like chat things. And so they probably exchange those emails with Naoki Yoshida in sort of like a group thing, a group sent email message, whatever, and they discuss. But for some reason, whoever was left in charge of handling melee DPS kind of scuffed it quite significantly with Samurai. And I've heard some people complaining a little bit about Monk as well and Ninja. So it seems that the guy, I don't want to say got lazy, but it does kind of feel like he maybe was a bit rushed. Or like he jumped the gun. I don't really know what the answer is. Only, his manager, his team manager, or Naoki Yoshida himself can answer that question. And Yoshida did answer players when they asked him during the patch note reading. I should say the Japanese players he answered when they were demanding that the guy come forward. They're saying, hey, whoever developed these changes, we want to hear his logic and reasoning behind them. And he basically answered that comment back, Naoki Yoshida, and said, well, I don't think it would really matter if we did have him come forward to speak, because basically me and him are of the same mind. So, and this is Yoshida's altruistic nature, basically, is that yes, he knows it's not good what the changes are, and he probably knew that it might niff quite a bit of people, but he probably didn't think it would be on this large a scale. So he greatly miscalculated there in thinking that us Samurai players weren't going to be so upset about what the truth of it is. This was kind of like the last straw, essentially, because like I said, we were already unhappy with what happened with the launch of Endwalker. And even if you go back to watch my playthrough of Endwalker, you can see that I mentioned, they basically stole away, our third eye and gave the better version of it to Reaper, Now, I'm not saying Reaper's a bad job, It's actually a pretty decent job. It's easy to pick up and understand as long as you know which resources proc and like what gauges need to be filled and whatnot. It's pretty straightforward. The combos are like easy to memorize, basically. But I'm quite a bit salty that they basically nerfed our shield, which had a sustained attached to it, and then they basically gave it to Reaper and gave it a buff. That's pretty messed up right there. Like, that already told me, like, what is this? What team member decided that was a good idea, and why? Like, I'm a bit peeved about that situation. But now, and I also said with that, since they took away our sustain and basically expected us to throw ourselves into things for only, like, let's see, 10%. Okay? 10%. So we're basically told throw yourself into the danger, but you're only gonna be reduced by 10%. So let's take that. Okay, developer. So let's say we're gonna do what you say. Okay, we're gonna use this and throw ourselves in harm's way. But what if that damage number completely over exceeds that 10%? Well, then you have one dead samurai on the floor because he was trying to get Kenki, which is stupid easy to get. Like, I'm going to show you guys here in a second how stupid easy it is to accumulate Kenki without having the use of Third Eye for only by 10 Kenki. Okay? When every time you're doing your regular rotation and your other stuff, it's already 5 Kenki. So plus 5, plus 5, plus 5. That's 15 Kenki for just doing your combos. Okay? And then you have these combo bonuses too here, like it says. It increases Kenki by 10, so 5 and then a boost combo of 10. So there you go. You're getting like dozens of Kenki resources basically built up just from hitting buttons. Whereas you have this one stupid button here that only gives you 10. It makes no logic or no sense at all. And like they said, button bloat was the problem for removing our Kaiten. Okay, then why do we still have Third Eye then? That's essentially made useless. There's no sense to having this Third Eye as a resource accumulation. They shouldn't have touched Third Eye, in my opinion. They should have just left it alone. Just like they should have left Kaiten alone. They just should have left it alone, and like some have suggested with Kaiten, basically, just have made Kaiten increase the crit chance of your big spender attacks. That's what should have happened, considering what they were going with in mind, so... And they might decide to walk this back, the patch when Ultimate is scheduled, or the patch prior to that. They might decide to walk this decision, and do exactly that, like players have suggested, and put Kaiten back, but give it the additional effect of increasing the crit chance by, I don't know, let's say, not 100%, but let's say 70 or 80. Well, yeah, 70 I would say is a fair thing. So let's say it gives crit chance by 70%. Okay. So that means if you were buffed by your dance partner, if you're partnered with a dancer, or you get the shared eye thing with the dragoons, or even Brotherhood, Battle Litany, whatever it is, then that helps that crit go even further, basically, giving us what we should have had. for our burst damage, essentially. And going back to the third eye thing, like I said, they should have just left it alone. There was no reason to do what they did to third eye. Like, if they wanted to temper with third eye, then sure, make it like Reaper's version. Just make it so that you get hit, okay. Well, you got hit, and basically you've created a barrier around yourself and, everyone else in the party. Okay, cool. Now Samurai has actually something to give the party. Alright? But that's not the route they decided to go, unfortunately. And yeah, I understand now too. There were some players, okay? Believe it or not, there were some players, okay? I've seen them post on places like Reddit, Discord, and official forums, and Facebook, whatever. I've seen people post things and say, Sam's a little hard for me. I just can't understand how to line up everything correctly. It's too hard, Like, can't you just decrease this or get rid of this, I've seen the players that are like that, okay? And let me tell you, they're basically the players who don't want to have to play the game. They want the game to play for them. And that's just unacceptable for a game like this, especially because you're gauged in challenging and hard content at endgame, the extreme trials, the savage raids, the ultimate fight trial. Those types of things, they really push you basically to understand how your job plays and works. Otherwise, you're going to be causing wipes, or you're going to be really severely holding back your teammates from getting a clear because you're not following your job the way it was meant to be played, the way that the developers developed it to be understood and played. And yes, I know a lot of people make those jokes about, Final Fantasy's becoming way too casual, The casuals are, ruining the game and all that, but that's not exactly true because, you know what? I'll tell you the honest truth, okay? I'm partly a casual player, okay? Like, I'm not against doing hardcore stuff. Like, if I find a reason to, I do it. And I learn it. And that's the thing that needs to be put across to our developers, is that if people want to do something, then they'll do it. They'll learn things and they'll trudge through it. Maybe some of them begrudgingly, but they'll still do it. They'll do what, at the end of the day, they're going to learn, one way or another. They're going to learn either easy way or the hard way. But too much development interference with that is going to end up in situations like this, where we end up with lots of vitriol against the developers, against other players. And it just doesn't create a good situation for anyone. And that's really kind of sad, I have to say. But one thing is brought us all together on common ground. And that's basically that we're all not really happy with this oversimplification, this homogenization of jobs that we really adore and like as they are. Now, so I can argue with that too and say, I do like Summoner how it is, but there are people that understandably were upset with how they changed Summoner. But I have to say about Summoner, basically, is that it is meant to be a summoner job. That's the literal name. Summoner. You're supposed to summon. You're not supposed to just be a dot mage, like, and pressing a dot, then mindlessly spamming two other buttons. That's not how Summoner's supposed to be. Like, Summoner's always been more of a support job, essentially. Like, they buff the party, they debuff the enemy, they call upon element of their god that they summon and incorporate it into their own spells, which is exactly what this current summoner does, is they incorporate the god's element that they summon into their own magic. And their god just appears and they do their big, huge special move. And that's basically what they do in other Final Fantasies, excluding number 11. Number 11 now, that's something completely different and a bit special. And even in 12, too, I guess. 11 and 12 basically share this unique summon system where you're basically... Oh, and I guess even number 10, too. So these 10, 11, and 12 basically share these unique summon systems where in 10 you actually control the summon and you order them to execute spells and attacks. In 11, it's more or less the same as 10, but basically the summon's a little bit more autonomous and will do things on their own. But if you order them to do a certain thing, then they'll do that certain thing as well. And they basically enhance your overall performance as the job summoner. Then 12, you summon them. They help you do battle. They do what they, they do their attacks, and then at the end, if you meet the conditions, then the summon will perform their special ability and do like a massive, huge amount of damage to basically enemies in the area. And that's basically the unique iterations of Summoner. And they tried to do those things again with 14 when they first initially brought Summoner over. They tried to do that exact same pattern of basically what happened in those previous games, but it didn't quite sit well with some players, like they didn't really understand it. And a lot of people said that Summoner was difficult to master. And so that's why devs decided to go ahead and nerf certain things or delete certain actions. And like Heaven's Word and, Stormblood and Shadowbringers. Then people were still not very satisfied with how Summoner played and how it felt. So they put their heads together and then they finally clicked them. Oh, hey, duh, it's a summoner. It's supposed to summon things. Okay. And the summons are supposed to do their thing. They're not supposed to, be the core identity, or like be the core mechanic, I should say, of this job. They're just supposed to be like a amenity. They're supposed to be like a fun amenity. And that's basically what they are now. Is when it feels cool and feels good to summon, Ifrit and Garuda and them guys, the other two summons, it feels good to summon them and have them do their, their big, their big attacks, and then you take over from there as the summoner. Like, that's basically how the classic summoner has worked in other Final Fantasies. But anyway, we weren't here to go off on summoner. We were talking about samurai, sorry, but I figure it was important to bring up summoner because it's always been in a rough place too. And in the same regards, machinist has too as a DPS job. It's been in a rough place, and they've haven't figured out exactly what the player base wants from either two jobs. But I feel like they're getting closer with machinist than they are with summoner. It seems like there's still a lot of discontent about summoner, like I said, and understandably so. Like I said, some people liked it the way it played before, and don't like how it is now. But I just bring up that the classic summoner is exactly like how current summoner is, and that's how it should be. Basically, you shouldn't have to think really about things so much. You should just do the summon. The god comes out and he bursts, and then he leaves back to the ethereal plane, or god realm, whatever he goes back to. And then the summoner will take on their trance. Yes, I said trance. Summoner will take on their trance and do elemental base damage. So, but anyway, samurai. A lot of us samurai mains and stuff were unhappy about the oversimplification and, I guess you could say, in a way, neutering of our job. And a lot of these changes don't make a lot of sense, like, at all. Like, their whole reasoning behind it doesn't quite fit and make a lot of sense. But I'm hoping that they'll get the message, I've heard other content creators like myself come out and give their word. Zeppla being one of them. I'm very happy to hear that Zeppla came out, because we need strong voices like hers and other players as well, other streamers. We need their strong voices to be sort of a median between us and basically the unofficial English director, Mr. Koji Fox. And we'll talk more about Koji in the next part here. But let me go ahead and just demonstrate like how samurai plays and feels, okay? So you're basically gonna go, the regular route at first. You're gonna build up your Kenki gauge. You're gonna use Midare Setsu Geiko once, okay? Once, but then you're gonna use Meikui, and then you're gonna do the, the combo. Sorry, you're gonna do the combo to proc another Midare, and then you're going to do Tsubami Geishi for the Super Midare, and then continue on from there. So let me just show that real fast. And yes, I know my rotation's not like the meta, okay? But but I don't follow trends or anything. I just know how to play my job decently. So, okay, now you saw there, we got our buffs up, debuffs, and dot. So you see as the Kenki's going up little by little till full. Then you're going to use a Midare. Okay. You're not going to use a Super Midare at the first, but since I've already got the Kenki full, I'll go ahead and do my Super. Then Shinten. Dot back up. Midare again. Okay. Then that's basically that. And that's basically your whole opening burst window there. Then you're just going to be spamming basically the other combos and stuff. But as you see, as you notice, the problem is now you have too much Kenki. And it's not depleting nearly enough. Basically forcing you to use this Shinten. Which, that's not how Shinten's supposed to operate. And like I said, I know meta will argue with me, but like I said, I don't care about trends and things like that. I really could give a shit less, honestly. Like I said, I know how to play my job, know how it operates. There's no reason to follow the meta. That's basically all you need to know when it comes to Samurai. Keep your dot and your buffs up. So from your Jinpu and Shifu buffs, keep those active as much as possible along with your dot. And then when you have your resources filled, then you're going to execute your burst. Which is exactly what I'm doing right here. This is the burst. Followed by no Mikiri. That's basically all you need to know about playing Samurai correctly. Okay. And like I said, Shinten should not be a spammed skill. It's really not that impressive of a skill, really, Shinten is. Even the animation is pretty basic, as you can see. It's just 1/forward. Like, you imagine, okay, for a minute, like, if you were to be a samurai, real life, alright? You're not gonna sit here stabbing like this multiple times, okay? That does not make any sense for a samurai. What you're going to do is you're going to stab, you're going to twist the blade, and then you're going to pull so that you can slice through your target. Either that, or you're going to stab once, your sword's going to get stuck because, go figure, if you're stabbed in a living thing, your sword's not going to move anywhere so easily unless you force it to slice through. Or you use a kick to kick them off of your blade and get your blade free from your stabbed target. And that's basically how, from a real standpoint, how samurai would operate. They would not sit here and keep stabbing over and over and over. Okay? Stabbing's for ninja. Okay? That's what ninja's good for, is for stabbing, because they're meant to assassinate and get things done quickly. They were not meant to prolong fights or battle. Ninjas are very much were stealthy, okay? So they are very much a stab and then run. Stab and or make sure the target goes down, quickly and quietly. Not a samurai. A samurai or a ronin. Okay, samurai or ronin, they're just meant to basically swing their blade around. Or to stab. But not to stab constantly. If they stabbed, like I said, it'd be like a very circumstantial reason for them to stab. Like, very oftentimes a samurai ronin would not stab unless they had no other option available left to them and they had to do a stab to penetrate, like, a person's defenses, basically. That's basically what stabbing was used for samurai and ronin. It was not used for combat, but it was more used to penetrate an enemy's defenses. Like, if there was an opening, for example, if they were dueling someone who also has a sword, okay? Like, then if there's an opening and they had that opening chance, which is a very low chance when you're in the heat of combat, in the thick of it. Like, you're not going to get many chances in real life to land a stab, because the person's going to see that, and they're gonna dodge, or they're going to swipe your blade away with their blade to block it, with their blade to counter, basically. So stabbing was not basically an incorporated move used for basically the majority of samurai disciplines. It was used only to basically, like I said, break through defenses or hit the enemy at an opening blind spot. That's basically it for stabbing. But the majority of the time, samurai would be swinging their blade like this, left to right, up and down. Just kind of horizontal, diagonally, all different angles to get an advantage. So, to me, it never made sense why Shinten had such a necessity when it should really only be used one time, and only one time, because that's basically how you would use a samurai sword in reality. Is you would not be trying to stab your enemy multiple times, especially if the first time your stab failed. Then that already tells you basically, yeah, okay, this guy's going to be wary of me trying to stab him now. He's not going to let me do that. So, like I said, stabbing in samurai disciplines is only used to penetrate defense or exploit an opening weakness spot. Because you're only going to get that one chance to hit the opening and then you're done. Whereas you're doing all your other swings and stuff, then that's going to help you create an opening to use a stab. But traditionally, because of how sharp samurai blades were made, they're meant to cut and slice through things. So they would definitely not waste effort and struggle trying to stab something or someone. It was just non-practical, basically. And so, having Shinten be so heavily relied on for Kenki is utter nonsense and impractical, is what I'm saying. Kaiten was that one ability that helped us actually use our Kenki resource. But now they took it away, and like I said, it just makes it kind of pointless. And spamming Shinten makes it really boring ability to use. You know what I'm saying, you guys? And then there's the new AoE thing, which I forgot about that as well. So now we have the new Tenka Goken, which as you can see is kind of like a weird circle thing, but it also kind of still has the cone lines all around it, so I mean, take of that how you will, but it's kind of weird to me. But at the same time, pretty cool too. And then of course there's this Shoha 2, which I said this at the beginning when they added something like Shoha 2 and stuff that basically your AoE rotation or AoE combo thing is mimicking your single target one, essentially. Like, all the skills are there. You have your basic combo here. Which then is going to give you your big spender, whatever. Which gives you your Gurn, which is your equivalent of Sene. Then you have your Shoha 2 when you have enough meditation stacks. And then they gave us Ogina Makiri, which is basically your AoE Meidare Setsugeka too. So, which that also, I don't understand that either. Why, make us have that? Oh yeah, and the other spender is Q10. That's the only other spender we have. But you're not meant to spam that either, like I said. You're not really meant to spam these abilities. So like I said, it really makes Kenki kind of pointless in the end. Which is very unfortunate. And like I said, it makes a lot of us samurai players dissatisfied with that feeling because our job feels kind of a bit mindless now. And that's just very unfortunate that things have to end up that way. But there's still some hope, like I said. As long as we unite together, we can get our voices heard. But there are some hurdles that we have to get over, okay? And that's what I'm going to talk about next for this video, and that's why I put player feedback. Alright, so let's talk about that then. I'm actually going to change scenery real quick, though. Alright, sorry about that. Just adjusting posture and gulping down a sip of water before we continue. Maybe I should mute these system sounds. They're a bit loud too, huh? Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about player feedback. Okay, so here's the issues with player feedback. So basically, we're told by the development team to use the official forums as their go-to outlet for giving feedback. However, there's a big issue with the official forums themselves. And this has been confirmed through numerous sources, of course. One being that the official forums is not even dictated or decided by the development team or Square Enix. But in truth, you see, the official forums is under the direction of the development team. So the development team does have some say in how the forums goes. But it's actually run by the community teams of Final Fantasy XIV, which we have 3 different teams for that, and that's kind of what causes a little bit of friction there as well. And in fact, you could say there's 4 different teams, because, over in China they have their own, forums, I'm sure, and probably Korea as well. They probably have their own forums separate of the big chunk of forums which the developers do look at themselves. And basically, the big forum which the developers look at primarily consists of the North American audience and Japanese audience, as well as Europeans audiences as well. Though mainly for the European side, it's mostly translated in either Dutch or, German or French. That's basically how they translate the European side of things, and then NA, the North America one, the West, is basically English. So, of course, we'll have English representation team that does our feedback. and it's separate from the other teams. And then they have admins and moderators, which they appoint. These teams, these representative teams, they hire and pay people to be basically forum admins, to make sure that the players are behaving and following the guidelines, which honestly, the guidelines of the forums, I'll tell you this now, honestly, it doesn't even sound like they were made for players. It sounds like they were made for, business people, and that's pretty damn sad, I have to say. Like, they run the forums like a business rather than a community. And you know how I know this? Because basically, I'm officially banned forever from the official forums. And you'll ask, well, geez, what did you do? What did you say to make them permanently ban you? Well, basically, there was a number of offenses, which two of them were for very stupid reasons. Okay? One of the reasons I got banned from the forum once is because, I shared a link of my video showing that the situation with Stormblood was pretty hectic and they should address it. But that warranted me getting a strike, obviously, because I was showing footage of how badly messed up their game was. So they took offense. Their neckbeard admin, or their Karen admin moderator, took offense to that, and so they just banned me outright for showing how bad their game was doing. Now another thing that I was banned on that was stupid is because I said a word that was out of context with what I was trying to get a point across, and they said, "Oh, that's inappropriate language." And I'm like, "Okay, but I wasn't saying it in like a mean, nasty way, the word I was trying to say." But they said, "Oh, no, you can't say that. That's an insult." And then finally, okay, this is where their last straw was done with these neckbeard or Karen moderators, is that I basically said, "Hey, your support sucks. It's lousy. You guys need to upgrade it or train better staff." And that was it with the Karen, and that's what finally set off the Karen or neckbeard moderator. And they said, "Okay, you know what? I'm done. We're done with him. Ban him permanently. No coming back." So yeah, it's childish behavior, the way that the NA forums is basically policed, essentially. And I wasn't the only victim in these Karens and neckbeards problems either. Like, they had gone like on a power kick or something, and like we're going on like a ban spree pretty much. Sorry, I had to yell at the cat. They were being bad. If it's not doggies, it's cats that are interrupting me during stream, I'm telling you. But yeah, these Karen and neckbeard moderators were going on a power high, banning people left and right for whatever reason they felt like banning for, and basically it led to outrage finally. And people basically called them out and said, and they told the developers, hey, you know what? If you're not gonna let me post my feedback, then I'm just not gonna talk to you at all. Basically, like, and I think it got to the Japanese forums. That's where it finally took ahead, where someone posted something, I guess, from NA and being banned and stuff, and finally, the head game master, which is Toshio Murakama or something like that. Basically, he's with Yoshida during most of the live letters, the guy with the white spiky hair. He sometimes calls himself Foxcon, or Foxconn, I think. But he's basically the head GM, the task force master. And he finally got word that, someone was abusing their moderator privileges, and he basically wrote them a letter and said, hey, you need to stop this. You need to investigate who's doing this and replace them, because they're causing a lot of friction between our Western player base. And if it doesn't stop, then we're going to have communal issues in game, basically. So that was an unfortunate case that happened, but was swiftly dealt with once Headmaster GM Foxconn finally put his boot down on it, and he got rid of the Karens and neckbeards that were easily offended by every little bad press or bad media that they give about their favorite MMO. So there was that, but there's also a lot of absent from our community team as a whole here in the western side. Like, it seems like our community representatives here in the west team, like, only post or share with us once in a blue moon. And like, they're also supposed to be working with, like I said, the unofficial NA director, Mr. Koji Fox. They're supposed to be working with him too, in order to get, all the right feedback sent to and translated to Mr. Naoki Yoshida's desk, so that he can understand it and be like, oh, that's what the Western audience thinks about these things. Okay, well, I guess we can discuss this with the other teams and see what they have to say and compare, Well, there's also another thing with that, is that a lot of things get lost in translation, or they're mistranslated. Like I said, the way that Japanese language works can be a little bit complicated at times. And it all depends on how things are written or said. Like if you write a character a certain way, it could have double meaning or three different kinds of meanings. So a lot of times I feel like they get a message and it just sounds like complete like nonsense or gibberish. Which, if that is the case, then that means they need to hire a better translator. But there's also another thing, is that the Japanese culture is vastly different from, the Western culture as well. Like, the Japanese are very strong on efficiency and basically having things be convenient. And anything that's not that, well, that's basically considered bad. So, if it's an inconvenience, then it's bad, and people will avoid it like the plague in their culture, essentially. And in some way, they kind of view our sometimes strongly worded criticisms and feedback the wrong way as, kind of like complaining for the sake of complaining, or like belly griping, or like just an inconvenience overall. So I feel like a lot of our Western feedback typically gets overlooked because these guys, I guess, who were collecting the information, and they're writing up the notes and submitting it to the representatives, who then translate, and they send it to Koji, who then makes sure that it gets to Naoki Yoshida's desk, that everything's clean and whatnot. And that. But the thing is, like I was bringing up earlier, okay, in my video, it doesn't really feel like our feedback's being taken real seriously. It really feels like it's just kind of out of the park and out of nowhere, especially considering these changes with Samurai and with housing. In fact, while we're on that, let's go into this housing debacle. Okay, so people weren't happy with the platform clicking stuff. It was getting old real fast, and it was meant to be a deterrent to people who were cheating to get houses, basically. Because there were instances where one person would basically bought farm or RMT just to get, billions of gil in their pockets, and then they would buy out an entire ward of houses. Like, no joke. Because there was no restrictions on the amount of houses at the time a single person can own, which is a dev oversight, of course. Like, I feel like they did leave it to the players' integrity, their moral integrity, but that's a mistake. never leave it up to the people's moral integrity, because they can and they will exploit things and create unfair advantages to get ahead. So that was oversight mixed with a mistake that they made. And so they tried to correct that by doing the lockout system and making it so that basically only you could only have one house per character on any world. So that still makes it, though, where the botters and stuff could still spam other worlds' housing areas to get multiple houses, but it curved them, and that's the reason why they implemented the lockout system and the world transfer, the house transfer system, is because they were trying to curve out that cheating aspect. But then the relocation system was heavily abused too, especially from what I found out the last time they added more houses, which is not the Ishgard thing, but before that, there were some people doing some really nasty stuff with the relocation thing. I heard that there were people who would purposely relocate just to make it so that the house had to be forced on the timer, which then encourages and emboldens like the bot armies basically to swarm the plot and make it unfair for everyone else to get a chance at a house. Like, I feel like this was done partially as a sick and cruel joke, but also out of spitefulness. Like, maybe the people doing it didn't get the house they wanted, so they had to make sure everyone else suffered with them, which is pretty damn petty. And thus that's why we ended up now not being able to use relocation, because people abused it. And they took away our ability to do so. And then there's also this problem with the lottery system. Now, there were people clamoring for this system, and unfortunately I have to bring up Zeppla here again. And don't get me wrong, I love Zeppla. I love her content, I love her videos and everything, but in this case, I think she kind of took a L here, because it's not all like what she thought it was going to be cracked out to be, is my assumption. But the thing with popular streamers, as I've noticed, is they have a hard time admitting when they were maybe wrong about something because of their ego. And like I said, I'm not dissing on Zeppla. I don't hate her. I love her content. I watch it a lot. But in this case, advocating for the lotto system kind of was really backfired on her a little bit. And the developers too. And all the other people that were clamoring for this lottery system. It all turned on their heads because of the way that the developers decided to implement this system. So basically, they've decided to make it majority free company only. Now, there's people that will argue about this case too. They'll say, well, you know what? A free company can house multiple people and give airship stuff and projects to do and a garden and whatever else, but all that stuff is dictated by the people in charge of the free company, okay? And that's the very reason why people wanted to have private houses to begin with, is because they didn't like the fact that someone basically dictated how to use the house, which is for the group. Okay. And basically, also with the way the private rooms are too, with free companies, is that if your free company leader or an officer doesn't like you, they don't like comments you say or anything, or they're easily offended and they kick you, well, then you just lost that room and all furnishings that were with that room. Okay, and the rooms were not free either, which is also baffling to me, is why, if they're really trying to promote free companies, then why still do people have to pay such a ridiculous sum of money for them? It costs 300,000 gil for a free company room, when logically it should only be like 100,000 gil. Or less than that. It should only be probably like 50,000. Like, there's no reason behind them having such a high price for free company rooms when they should logically be included with the free company house for a very, very minimal fee. Because, you have free companies that come and go a lot. You have people that come and go from this game a lot. And that's the other thing, is that sometimes there's free companies who essentially, what they do is they kick inactive players. Now, go ahead and tell me now how exactly this encourages players to take a break, Mr. Naoki Yoshida. And whoever else says, oh, it's okay to go on a break, you don't have to play all the time. Okay, well, what happens then when an officer, like I said, or a free company leader decides, oh, this guy, I don't remember him, he hasn't been on for a really long time, so I'm going to just boot him. And then for them to realize, oh, shoot, he had a room too. Oh, well, my bad. Yeah, exactly, they're bad. Because that means that they just basically lost all their stuff in that room, plus the gil they invested into it. So, the free company housing system is very unfair towards single players, okay? Or players who prefer to play, with their own friends outside of a free company, etc. Now, they've tried to alleviate that with the apartment system, but unfortunately people were unhappy with that, because not only is it basically the equivalent size of a free company room, but you couldn't garden, and we didn't have a chocobo stable at first. And plus there's no way to use airships unless you're with a free company, and like your leader or whatever says it's okay to use the airships or submarine or whatever, or the workshop. So again, free companies being dictated by others rather than being a group thing. Like, it's just not a very good system overall. and it really shows. And now, like, they're even trying to limit activities within free companies now. With this lotto system change now, like, they're saying that you have to have been a member for like a whole month total of a free company to be able to help like your groupies basically get a house if your free company is houseless. So how is that helping basically new players? It's really not. Because let's say like there's a group of new players who decided they wanted to create their own free company for their group of friends. Okay, so they do so, but they're told when there's available plot, but they go to the plot and it says, "Oh, you can't buy this house until 30 days have passed your free company's founding or whatever, or you joined the group and you haven't been a member for a month." Well, I guess they're just out of luck, huh? It goes straight to the bots and the ghost free companies. Basically, free companies that people use for the purpose to sell and advertise selling house plots via third party means. So basically, the system screws new players out of getting a house for themselves or for their group. And not only that, again, with the solo players owning a house, which is what the majority wants across the whole board, the majority just wants their own private little space to live in. Like, sure, it's okay to hang out with a free company every once in a while at the guild house and whatnot and do various activities and whatnot, but like I said, with everything being dictated to certain individuals, which promotes favoritism and tribalism, by the way, favoritism plus tribalism, then it just makes it a very terrible system overall for groups and for individuals who want to be able to interact with that type of content. So this lotto system is not a good system, and it only promotes further discourse, and it's not going to stop the bots. I can tell you that much. It's not going to stop them. In fact, it's just embraces them further, because now not only can they farm their gil like they do for endless hours, they can just have their bots run for them to collect all the gil they need, or all the stuff they need to farm for gil. They also there's also the RMT problem. People buying and selling gil. This encourages people to only buy and sell gil even further, because now that housing's so limited for the individuals, they're going to feel like they have to outbid the competition, basically. So they're going to make alt characters and split up that gil between their alts, so that they can get a house. So you may have cut down one problem, but now you've created several other problems with this new system. So they're essentially splitting hairs now, even further than they've been split before. So, and I've made a suggestion on what they should do to fix this problem. I've suggested what they do for this is they need to get rid of this system. This old system needs to go. It needs to stop. They need to stop, keep adding wards to the ward system and just go the instance route for single house owners, okay? Give players their own instance space, which they can decorate. They can add a house onto if they want to. And the house, since it's in an instance area, doesn't need to be instant. So you don't need to stack instances upon instances, because this just creates a loading mess, okay? Now, I've said this before because people don't understand. The developers make literally instant zones with fully furnished furnishings, landscaping, and houses every expansion. This area I'm in, for example, this is a completely instance zone that they created and added all this fancy stuff to, all these chairs, all these lights, this little puppet thing, this food here, these stools, those trees. And this isn't a very big area either. See, look at this. And it's comprised of subsections even. So you have this little subsection here and this subsection here. And this right here is basically the main section. Right here. That's it. And it's not very big, really. They make spaces like this every single expansion. And in fact, we just barely got a new instance space even for the new 24-man raid in this patch. It's basically a floating island. They could do the very exact same thing, and that could be an instance that a single player, can decorate. And it doesn't need to be like that massive either. Like, let's take this section for example, okay? Let's say they theoretically give us players an instant zone of this like section size, for example. Or even this little smaller block over here. Okay? In fact, let me go over to the smaller block so we can compare. Okay, so here we are, this smaller block. Now look, this is almost like the size of like a medium house right here, okay? This little building structure, whatever it is you want to call it. Okay, this is like a medium-sized, good-sized house. Now, of course, they have this little shed thing here in the back too. But just look at this square feet here. Not only can you add a house to this size, but look, they also have added trees. And like this little lantern looking thing. And even chairs and a couple chairs and tables. So just imagine, if you will, if they decided to go the route of giving us players instance house zone for us to own. Okay, let's say that they give us something akin to this size, and look how much stuff that you can already place in it here. There's a lot of stuff that you can place. Okay. There's furnishings everywhere. And pillars even. Pillars and a roof. And then you have this platform. So let's say that counts as furnishing, right? Okay, so let's see. Multiple bushes, multiple trees, multiple lanterns. That's probably like, what, 20 or 30 slots of, like, instance furnishings. So there's that. Then the house itself counts as basically a whole furnishing. And then like all this bridge, these pillars, that's another like 20 furnishings. Then you have all this here, these shelves, these desks, these chairs, this whiteboard thing here. Again, and then there's stuff on top. Those are also furnishings. So that's like a whole lot of furnishings, you guys, alone. Just for something of this small little size here. Now, imagine, if you will, like I said, they give us players a single player home instance like this size, where you can just place a set number of furnishings. Let's say they give you a set limit of 1,000 furnishings or something like to that effect. They probably wouldn't allow 1,000 probably, but I'm just giving that out as a number, as an example. Realistically, they would probably have to shorten it because of the server, the way the servers work with loading and stuff. They realistically probably only give us like a total of like, I want to say probably 600 slots. So, which is still a pretty decent amount of slots for an instance area. So you could put 600 furnishings down, plus a house. Okay. And the house itself, like I said, the house itself would count as one whole furnishing. And then whatever you put in the house, inside that house, because the house would not be instance, okay? The inside would not be instance. It would need to be exactly like this, okay? Just an open area that you can walk inside and out of, just like any other NPC house that you see in the open world. Well, at least you used to be able to see in a Realm Reborn areas, but these days those are kind of scarce now. I don't understand why that is, and I have my own gripes, but that's not what we're came to discuss. So, but yeah, just things like this, okay? They do this every expansion. They can do this for solo players too. It's not that hard. They literally have billions, well, probably not billions, but millions of dollars at their disposal, which is spent on assets, okay? They spend these dollars on assets for in-game use. And the assets go into building stuff like this. Okay? That's what the assets are used for. And to also make like clothing and like fashion stuff. Assets are used for that. And assets are used for making trees and making this gravel here. And the water. And making these flashy animations for jobs here. As well as creating new jobs. It's used Assets are used to create new jobs. Now let's talk about that as well. Which asset do you think is probably the most expensive one out of those assets that we've mentioned? That would be the new jobs. New jobs and the boss models. Okay, those and the animations, like the animation stuff, actions like this. That's what's cost the most resources and the most money. So that's basically where all their so that's what I'm basically explaining to you guys here. That's basically where all their money goes to. As it goes to basically creation of new jobs, of boss unique bosses and enemy mobs, as well as animations and stuff. And voice acting too. Voice acting is not real cheap work to hire on either, because they have to write up contracts for voice acting, and the actors have to agree to the contract and abide by that contract, which they signed and are paid for. And these contracts can be anywhere from, like, let's say, I want to say like 1.8 grand to 3 grand. So they're not cheap. It's not cheap hiring voice actors, you guys. It gets pretty expensive if you want, like, especially if you really want a professional to handle the voice acting. Like, it's not cheap. It costs quite a lot of money in a contract. And if the voice actor breaks the contract, well, they still get paid, but they don't get all of that money in the contract. And basically, that money that was used on the contract gets split, basically. Like, the voice actor gets the money, the part of the money that they did work for, but whatever's left from that, which is probably not going to be a lot, is just going to be fed into, like I said, stuff like job design, animations, and basically unique enemies and stuff like that. But stuff like this instances is kind of on the back burner. And like quality of life adjustments and everything, they're all kind of like an afterthought essentially. Which is a pretty damn shame, because this game is pretty beautiful and unique. And one of the things I praise the most is how they design these huge maps and stuff and how they look. It's just a shame that they spend as little bit of money and resources on it as possible. And the end result of that is we end up just with these basically prop set pieces. You can't go inside buildings or anything. They're just completely locked and empty and hollow inside. Which, again, like I said, in A Realm Reborn, that wasn't the case. In A Realm Reborn and a little bit of Heaven's Ward, you could actually go into a lot of structures and stuff like that. And there would actually be like a couple furnishings or NPCs in them. But once Stormblood landed and everything. And ever since then, it's all just been just these really unsatisfying set pieces, and you can't even go inside the buildings or nothing. Really, really disappointing. And like I said, it's because all the resources, development resources, goes towards animations, new job design, bosses, and enemy models, and just animations. And as well as, voice acting. Those things eat up the money and resources, leaving the bare bone minimal for whatever else. And so they're basically forced then, when they're that low on the remaining resources and stuff, basically then they're forced to cut corners, which they have been doing. I've noticed that if this expansion and Shadowbringers, they have to cut corners in doing a lot of things, and it's just pretty unsatisfying. It's bland and it's boring, which is words that developers should never have to hear from their fan base and their player base. They should never have to hear that things are stale, bland, or boring. But it's the truth, you know. That's just the way it is. And the things I can name off the top of my head, if you want example of things they've cut corners on, besides, having an immersive open world, which is what a lot of their players want, by the way. Like, a lot of people that subscribe to this game, they want to immerse themselves in this game and this world. But unfortunately, their options are incredibly limited the further they go in the expansions. Whereas when they start the game, it feels like a whole grand adventure, like there's so much to see and interact with in A Realm Reborn. Which is why I'm saying to people who criticize A Realm Reborn, you need to open your eyes and look at it from that perspective. Like, really, you guys, open your eyes and your minds and see it from that perspective. People want to be immersed. They don't want to follow, like, basically a treadmill, They don't want to follow just a single path, road, treadmill that gets worse as you progress rather than getting better. That's the thing that you guys have to understand here, is that things have been getting worse rather than better. And I know there's going to be those negative Nancy's there that will argue against that. That will come out and say, what do you mean worse? You're full of it. We've got multiple subs now. There's lots of players playing the game now. And I'll say to them, that's because they're too naive to realize what this game actually is. Like, they're just following the hype. That's all it is. It's just the hype train. But once that rose-tinted glasses phase, the honeymoon phase, is over, then they're like, I'm bored. What do you guys do in this game? Like, I did all that stuff there. I did the story. I leveled all my jobs. I leveled crafting and gathering. I did fishing stuff. I did some raids, I did some PvP, what else is there? And then their answer's going to be, that's it. And they're going to be like, really? Well, okay, then I'm just going to sub then. Like, really, that's how this cycle goes, you guys. I'm not making this stuff up. And it's really unfortunate, too, that that's how it ends up, but that's the truth. And to any of the veteran players who come and watch my videos, they're probably silently shaking their head agreeing, like, yeah, that's the truth, that's what it is. Like, people that complain that this game is too hard, I don't see their logic. Like, there is no logic to it. They're just saying that it's hard for them because they don't want to put in the effort. Like I brought up earlier, they want the game to play for them. They don't want to play the game. But this is an MMO. This is an RPG as well. You're meant to play the game, not to sit and watch it play itself. If you want something like that, well, there's plenty of mobile games that do just that for you. Or there's plenty of other heavily story-oriented games that will play the game for you, and you just have to sit there and watch and occasionally click one button or two buttons. There's plenty of games out there for that type of player, but this isn't one of them. You actually do have to think about things. And then you actually have to go and execute those things. But in the end, that's what makes this game so satisfying, is that you have options, you have choices to make. And that's what I think the developers really need to remember here from us players, is that we enjoy being immersed. We like to explore, and we like to have options, We like to have more than one option to play, and that's the thing that I should bring up in this video as well, with the whole solo game becoming too casual, too soloable. It's just adding another option to the already wonderful game we have here. It's not meant to deter like anyone who's currently playing the game. It's just meant to add on to that, to give people another option of how to play the game. And that's only a benefit for the game, is to have more options. Now the streamlining, okay, here's where we need to separate the topic and difference between that here. There's people who can play solo and still enjoy how the gameplay plays. But the development taking a stance on basically oversimplifying, so that these more casual players who want to play solo can better fit in, is actually not helping them, those solo players at all. And in fact, it's putting them off. Like, they just need to keep the options there, but they need to not gut everything else and break everything else in the process, which is basically what's happening with our poor samurai right now. Is they're dissecting samurai in order to make it easier for the solo goer, which isn't exactly what they need to be able to enjoy this game solo. And like I said, the people complaining that samurai's too hard, they don't even play the job themselves. Like, they probably played it one time, I betcha. They probably only played it once and decided they didn't like it and it was too hard. Okay. That's the kind of mindset these people have that say it's too hard. Is they try it once and they didn't like it, so they say it's bad, it's too hard. But they're a very, very, very small minority. Okay, they're not the majority. There's not a, look at all this outrage, basically, over these changes for samurai. Look at that. There's more people against this change than there are people for it. And yeah, I've seen a couple people try to sneak in and nod their head saying, yeah, this is fine. I like this better. But, again, they're part of that really small minority group. Whereas you can see there's a vast majority that are against rather than for this change. And you know what? Maybe that was the plan of these players that's saying they're for the change too, for all we know. Maybe they wanted to divide us so that we'd get distracted from, let's say, housing. Maybe that was their plot all along, huh? How about that? Sure, that might sound a little conspiracy theorists, but hey, oftentimes the truth is stranger than fiction, no? So I could 100% believe that, yeah, could be a small fringe group just trying to gut classes for the sake of distracting us from other things like housing, for example. So, and that's just a thing, a tool of manipulation, basically. So, and unfortunately, the devs fell for it right smack dab into their hands, which might have been what they predicted too. Like, it wouldn't surprise me at all if that's the case. Like, if they predicted that, Mr. Yoshida would fall for their manipulations, their deception, if they worded things a certain way that made him take pity on them. So, be careful out there, I guess is what I should warn you guys of, is that there are very clever people like that who know how to play others like a fiddle. They're cunning, they're manipulative, and chances are they're probably the guild sellers. The RMT people, they're probably them. I would not doubt that at all. And not just that, but it could possibly be, investors. Okay, these accounts that are saying things like this could be investors into Final Fantasy XIV. As you know, once investors start to pull strings of like any game at all, let's say for example Activision and Toei, other game places, once the investor starts to pull strings, that's when games start to fail and hit hard. So, rather than feeding these people's ego, and feeding their machinations. Ask them questions instead. Ask them why they think something's easy, or why they think something's hard. Now, depending on their answer, that's how you'll know. And if they don't have a straight answer, well, then you know something's fishy. And that something's not quite right. So just keep that in mind. And yes, these people hate people like me because I tend to outwit them. And I see through their games, their manipulation tactics, their fear-mongering, their divisive tactics. That's basically how investors are. Because they think themselves kings and queens. They worship the almighty dollar, as you guys know. And if they have to burn some bridges, then they burn not only the bridge, but the land right behind it. So, be wary of that. And in fact, let's help the devs with that as well. Let's bring that to their attention as well and see what they have to say. This will really test their loyalty too. You see, if you bring such things to the devs' attention, and the devs have either no comments, or they skipped such questions, for example, then that's how you know where their loyalty really lies, huh? But in any case, I've said what I needed to say in this video. I hope it helps you guys out. I don't know that it will or it won't, but I've given you ammunition to use, given you knowledge and wisdom. It's up to you to decide how to use that knowledge. Hopefully you use it for the best, because we really could use it in this game. And like I said, the only way we're going to get that to happen and get over that hurdle of these cunning, manipulative investors and their guards, their old vanguard, is if we come together as a whole and we get people like Zepla, Asmongold, Mr. Happy, Miztech, Larry Zor, Drac Gamingstein, Work to Game. If we get all these kinds of people to just join our voices and we all stand together on the same front, then guess what will happen? You guessed. Yes. Actual changes will happen. Because when we outnumber the old guard and the investors, the cunning, manipulative investors, then that's when we actually get what we want and what we've been asking for. Okay, you guys? So don't let these cunning foxes, these gray old foxes, twist your ears and twist your arm. Because they can, and they do that quite effectively if you let them. But if you're smart, which I know you guys can be smart when you work together, then that's when you can finally put them to rest and get the developers what they need. Well, alright then, guys. It's been swell. I don't know when we'll see you next, but I'll be keeping my eyes and ears out. Hope you succeed in your endeavors, and hope that this game continues to bring you what you want most, so long as you aren't afraid and you stand with friends and stand together for the better. 12 keep you, and may you walk in the light.